So about 8 years ago, I had the honor to produce Second City's 50th anniversary celebration. So we invited in alumni from every generation to Chicago for the weekend. And we did performances and panel discussions and workshops. But my favorite moment actually didn't happen for the public or even on stage. We were in rehearsal during the day, and a couple of alums were trying to get lines to a scene and it was not going well. And in the wings and in the dark were Harold Ramis and Stephen Colbert, and then me. And I see Stephen turn to Harold and say, "Hey, is this a weird time for me to say how much I admire you and your work?" And Harold turns to Stephen and goes, "I don't know, Stephen. Is it a weird time for me to say how much I admire you and your work?" And I just sort of smiled and went back to watching. And what I loved about this moment was that these two brilliant artists had this immense moment of vulnerability. And yes, they are brilliant artists, but they are human beings who have idiosyncrasies and insecurities. So I've worked at Second City for nearly 30 years. And one of the questions I get asked by media all the time is there a common characteristic that runs through all of this talent? And I sort of have this stock comic answer, which is that no one got into comedy because they're well-adjusted. All right, so between the 50th anniversary and the forces that have allowed me to be in front of you today, a lot has happened. I ended up producing a show with Lyric Opera and Renee Fleming, a Second City guide to the opera. We created a hybrid comedy dance show with Hubbard Street Dance. We developed a truly profane version of A Christmas Carol that has toured the country. And I co-wrote a book called Yes And, which is about taking our improvisational practice into businesses. But it's not the successes that brought me here today. It's the challenges and the failures and the mistakes. Because when I came off book tour, I had this tremendous sense of unease about myself and my job. Some people might call it a midlife crisis. I am calling it a sense of unease. But I ended up quitting my job at Second City with nothing in front of me. And I had a kid going to college. Not good. Our owner, Andrew Alexander, took pity on me and he said, "Listen, hang out for a year, we'll pay you, and maybe you can figure out a bridge to stay or a bridge to go." And he actually gave me a new office right next to his in the front of Second City, so that was kind of amazing. In 2 weeks, there was a grease fire in the restaurant below us, and the administrative offices at Second City incinerated. I lost everything. Every memory, every photo, every alumni correspondence, gone. We got moved to this temporary office space in downtown Chicago, which we called quickly the Beige Palace, because it was beige. We were crammed 5, 6, 7 people into offices that should have one. The two ladies who ran the office used to yell at us because we laughed too much. But it was in this place of tremendous discomfort that I had to create a new way to work and new relationships and new patterns. And this is what I want to talk to you about today, is this idea around strategic discomfort. Because it's my firm belief that one of the biggest obstacles to innovation is actually past success. And I also believe that improvisation, fueled by evidence-based science, will become a dominant practice of the 20th century, like a morning prayer, like a morning workout. Because improvisation is practice in being unpracticed, which is what we do every day. Okay, so back to the tiny, terrible office. I am talking to my then boss, Steve Johnston, and he's like, "What do you want to do? You're in this new position. Is there an idea you have?" And I said, "Yeah, well, I actually have been kicking around one thing, because when I was on book tour," and I'm actually going to pause a second, any author who tells you he doesn't do what I'm about to tell you that I do is lying. When I would be on book tour, I'd go into a bookstore to see if my book was there. Did it in every city. And since I wrote a business book, I would see all the other business books that are there. And I said to Steve, I see all these books around the art of negotiation. And they all talk about how important improvisation is, but none of them go any deeper than that. I said, what if we teamed up with an academic and we created an improv negotiation workshop? And he said, "Yep, go, do it." So I go to my office and I Google academic Chicago negotiation. I get 5 professors, the first 5 that go up. 4 of them contact me within 48 hours. 2 of them want to do the program. So it's about 2 weeks later, I'm about to seal the deal, and the 5th contacts me. And his name is Eugene Caruso, and he's at the Booth School of Business at the University of Chicago. He says, "Kelly, I'm sorry I didn't get in touch with you. Do you still want to meet?" I'm like, "Sure, I'll come meet." He goes, "Great. I'm going to invite my wife, Heather. She's also a professor here. I think she'd be interested." So I go to the University of Chicago, I'm meeting with Eugene and Heather, and I'm just off book tour, and I've been doing a lot of speaking. So I got my improv rap down. I'm like, improv is yoga for your social skills. Improvisation is loud group mindfulness. Improvisation is practice in abundant choices and agility and presence. I mean, I am nailing it. And Eugene is not even looking at me. He could give a shit. He is looking at Heather. Heather is smiling at me with these knowing eyes. And when I finish, Heather says to me, Kelly, we're behavioral scientists. We have decades and decades of research that shows us that people make bad choices for themselves. And what you're talking about is a pedagogy, an art form, a practice, in allowing people to make better and different choices. Those two things have never been put together. So 6 months later, we announced a partnership between the Center for Decision Research at Chicago Booth at the University of Chicago and the Second City to study behavioral science through the lens of improvisation. So I've been hanging out with these nerdy scientists for a year. So I'm gonna tell you about a couple things that I've discovered in that time. So one of the things about improvisation is we talk about the need to be others-focused, right? This is really important because when you're creating a script out of nothing with your partner, you need to concentrate on them rather than you. And as we're talking to Heather about this idea, she's like, well, you have to know the work of William Swann and self-verification theory. And we're like, no, we're not nerds. We don't know what that is. And so this idea was really cool. So I think most of us have the sense that we want to be seen as our best selves, right? Our smartest selves, our prettiest selves. Swann's work in self-verification theory says something different. It says that people want to be seen as they see themselves. So if I see myself as clumsy, it's important that you see me as clumsy so you don't throw me a ball. But I'm a human being and I'm not gonna tell you that. And we thought this was such a fascinating thing when we thought about what it means to be others focused. It also explains a lot why we date assholes. But that is another story. I don't need to cover that right now. We also talked about this idea of yes and, which is the title of my book. And the idea around yes and is that when you are improvising, you're groups of people making something out of nothing. You can't do that by saying no, and you can't stop at yes. You have to say yes and. You have to affirm and contribute in order to explore and heighten. And some of the scholars were like, well, how do you teach yes and? And we're like, okay, well, yeah, we have groups like this, corporate groups that we gather, and we do this exercise. We've been doing it for decades. It works great. So we talked them through it. What we do often is we have people pair up. You guys don't have to do this now. We have person A and person B. Person A, it's your birthday. You're going to pitch your birthday party to person B. Person B's job is to say no because to every initiation, do it for a minute, go. Right? That's not fun. And then we have them switch. Person B, it's your birthday. You pitch to person A. Person A is going to say yes, but go. All right? And we talk about that. And then third, we say, okay, person A, you're going to pitch. Now your idea is going to be yes-anded. Both of you are going to yes-and every idea. And inevitably what happens is it's like laughter in the room, the volume goes up, and we start talking about what they planned, and it's like having sushi on the moon. I mean, it's great. So we describe this, and one of the scholars goes, yeah, I think you're doing it wrong. What? We've made millions of dollars doing it this way. He goes, no, you should be doing it the other way. I'm like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, yeah, no, you should start with yes and work your way to the no. We're like, why? He goes, because of loss aversion. We're like, what is loss aversion? And some of you know this, but in behavioral economics, the idea is that human beings hate having something taken away from them more than they want to gain something. So 2 weeks later, Mark Sutton, one of our teachers, did it with a corporate group. And he started with yes and, then did yes but, and then did no. And he comes to my office and goes, well, I did it. I discovered 2 things. I go, what? And he goes, well, the learning was deeper because by the time we got to that no, they were pissed. And I go, what was the second point? And he goes, they remained pissed for the rest of the workshop and screwed up the whole workshop. So perhaps the performative aspects of the yes and the other way are the way we should go. And it's interesting being exposed to all these scientists and these theories as it relates to our improv stuff, and this idea of focus keeps coming up because we're just so bombarded with images. And Adam Alter, who's at the Stern School of Business in NYU, cites this Microsoft study that I love, which is that the average human attention span in 2001 was 12 seconds. In 2013, it's 8 seconds. For a point of comparison, a goldfish, 9 seconds. We're 1 second lower than a goldfish, people. But there's solutions, right? And Alter talks about technical solutions, and then we have improv solutions. So my wife has worked at Second City longer than I have, and she's a longtime improv instructor. And when our kids were little, she'd drive them around, and they would fight all the time. And finally, she's like, I am going to do this. I'm going to have them play an improv game in the car. And so she would have them play a game called One Word Story, where they would tell a story one word at a time. And they loved the game, and it got them to focus and to listen. And a couple other things that they learned. They learned the importance of the and to a story, that not everything is a big, juicy verb or noun. And they also learned how to share and co-create conversation, which was huge in their social lives and their school lives. So the Alter solution, which I think is amazing, is the lack of focus that we've got on our brains at work, especially when we're supposed to go on vacation, because we never really do. And he brings up this thing that happens for Daimler Chrysler employees in Europe. So if you go on vacation and you work at Daimler Chrysler in Europe, and someone sends you a business email, that email is returned right away to them saying, your email was not delivered. You can contact this person at so-and-so time when they're back from vacation, or reach out to this other person. So when you work for Daimler Chrysler and you're on vacation and you come back in and you open up your email, your inbox looks just the way it did when you left. Imagine that. All right, and one more point. Because of that, when you're on vacation, no reason to check your email, because there's no emails coming in. And this is the thing I've been thinking about with regard to this talk, and I go back to this term that I used to say, which is nobody got into comedy because they're well-adjusted, and I've changed that to nobody becomes an adult because they're well-adjusted. And I think that's a good thing, because we can't stop learning, and we have to upset our patterns. Because if there's one thing I'm thinking about every single day, it's that our absolute certainty about our own beliefs is killing us in this country right now. And as I was trying to figure out how to end this talk, I was literally on the plane. I'm like, how am I going to end this? I got the cool thing about things killing us in the country, and I really believe it. And I'm reading this book by Sam Wasson. And Sam has written a book called Improv Nation. It comes out in December, so I got galleys, and it's about the history of improvisation. And I stumbled upon this quote, and I had to write it down. And it's from Wynton Marsalis, and it just killed me. And it said, the real power of jazz is that a group of people can come together and create art, improvised art, and can negotiate their agendas with each other, and that negotiation is the art. And I thought back to me going to University of Chicago to build this negotiation thing with Heather and Eugene, and we built something much bigger. And then I realized, man, the negotiation was a process, and the process is an art. And that's what we're doing. Thank you very much.